Hello everyone, you're watching Let's Talk About Prepping. I'm Tyler, your host, and in this video we're going to discuss the new tobacco age laws. Um, Tobacco age is not necessarily something that always would fall under my purview as a prepping channel, but gun laws often do. And with everything that's been going on with the gun laws and the talk about rights in the prepping community, I think it's relevant to talk about this. Now, it's my opinion that you should not be taking rights from anybody, especially not adults, who have hardly had any time to have any say in the political system, but who will definitely be sent to kill and die and expected to pay taxes and all kinds of old things. And so I, for one, will say that I think that it's wrong, but I'll leave the live chat open for discussion. But it doesn't sit right with me. I'm all for people being healthy. I think that should be part of education and child raising, and not taking rights from people. We're not a nanny state. It's none of your business what someone else does, and it's none of mine. And I think that that's the way that it should stay, even if it ends up with a lot of people having lung cancer later on. You want to write laws that exempt them from being able to take money from other people for their own health care? It's another thing altogether. But the logic that is used to take these rights from those people can be used to take your rights from you. And if you drink, if you do anything that anybody else could have a health reason or some moral reason to take that from you, you need to stop and ask yourself, why are you okay with this right being taken from someone else? They will always take away the rights that are easy to scapegoat, that are easy to justify in the minds of the majority. But that's a very Animal Farm way of thinking of things. Love to hear your comments on it if you're rewatching this. Otherwise, I'll sort of hang out here and see who manages to hop into the chat. But I'm definitely interested in your opinions. It will be interesting. It's easy to take rights from 18-year-olds. And it's easy to ignore their cries when it happens because they're teenagers, and we're all used to listening to teenagers moan, and we're all used to not caring about it. So it's easy to take rights away. But I think we need to ask ourselves why it's all right to take away the rights of other adults, however young they are. And I think that it opens the question of whether or not we need to change the age of adulthood in America. I think that many people would probably say that 18-year-olds are not true adults. I mean, most people seem to belittle them and treat them as though they're not adults. And so I do wonder if a lot of people wouldn't then support taking away the age of adulthood until you're 21. It's an interesting question. I'm not saying that that's what we should do, but I do think that it's an interesting question to look at what we expect of 18-year-olds. They're allowed to get into debt that they cannot bankrupt out of. They're allowed to go and die for their country, and they're definitely allowed to pay or required to pay taxes or go to prison like an adult. But we do start to take more and more of their rights away. Rights that they have no way to vote for in time to get them back. So I think it's an interesting question. What interests me the most is how many people do not care. The mentality of it doesn't affect me, so I don't care is very strong lately. And maybe this isn't the sticking point issue of our time, but I definitely feel that the mentality of it doesn't affect me, so I guess I'm okay with it, is the symptom of something much worse. I've had multiple people who thought that they were getting grandfathered in because they were 19 say, well, I'm 19, so I guess I don't really care. And I had to inform them that the law does not grandfather anybody in. So anybody who is under the age of 21 from now on will not be able to buy tobacco or tobacco products. And so I watched the dichotomy right there, and then individual or multiple individuals who thought that they were going to be grandfathered in and were okay with the law until they found out that they weren't, and suddenly had all of the doom of it fall down upon them. And it's just a very interesting scenario to be able to watch somebody who in 1 minute is okay with a right being taken away from somebody else, and then be able to watch them as they realize that that somebody else is in fact them, and them to be suddenly not okay with it. And that is something that can happen to any of us with any of our rights. Hello, Space Girl. How you doing? And I agree with what you have to say there. I think that this comes down to a matter of education and a matter of how people are raised. And I think it comes down to, people being responsible for their own behavior. Especially when it comes down to it, this is something. Yeah, I am. How are you doing? How's your holiday season been? But yeah, when it comes down to it, a person's tobacco use is only harming themselves. And if you live in a socialist healthcare system where you may well be you may well end up paying for somebody else's lung cancer because they chose to smoke cigarettes, I would argue that there are plenty of other health factors that we need to end up controlling people for, like what they eat and how much exercise they get, and all kinds of things that if we're going to control other people's behaviors based on our need to pay for their health care, I mean, that is a bottomless hole. But the fact of the matter is, especially when it's something that is only affecting them and their health and well-being, people need to stay out of it unless they want things that affect their own health and well-being to be affected. And well, Glenn, I mean, secondhand smoke is arguably child abuse, and that would be the same purview that it should fall under. And if we are going to start policing secondhand smoke, then there are a lot of other coincidental behaviors that need to be policed first, like just outright child abuse. But that would involve an invasion of privacy that most people are not prepared for. If you want to ban cigarettes to stop secondhand smoke, then we need to ban alcohol to stop people getting drunk and beating people. And that's my next point. Hey, Prepper's daughter, how you doing? Yeah, they don't give you checkbooks, actually, unless you ask for them, for one thing. But no, the school does not teach you how to perform American or adult finances. Where they smoke? I guess I'm not sure what you mean. My point is, when a person chooses to smoke, they're affecting themselves. If they do it in a way that harms somebody else, then I would argue that, maybe you could regulate that. If you want to make it illegal to subject somebody else to secondhand smoke, that might be very well a pretty fair law. But if you want to make it so that an individual has no right to purchase tobacco because they might subject someone else to secondhand smoke, I would say that that's not the right way to do it. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be the fair way to do it, is pass a law that it's a fine to make somebody else be subjected to your smoke. But again, then there are a lot of other things that are probably going to fall under that purview. Every time we pass a law, it sets a precedent for other laws to be passed. I mean, Space Girl, I think that largely just comes down to an individual's upbringing. For instance, a lot of churches will teach people that kind of stuff. But hey, Will, how you doing? Just in time prepping. But no, I think that what you're talking about falls under home ec. Balancing a home budget and things like that is all home economics type of stuff. And they haven't taught home ec since the 1980s in most places. And that's the thing, Glenn, is the precedent of most American law is you're pretty much free to pursue your own interests and happiness as long as it doesn't harm somebody else or interfere with their own pursuit of happiness. But so many of our laws are coming down to being a nanny state, doing what we think is better for other people. I mean, I'm going to be honest, maybe a little harsh, but I don't really care if a bunch of 18-year-olds are out there vaping. People have been smoking since the age of 12 for a very long time. A lot of the people that I was friends with in my late teens and early 20s, mid 20s, a lot of people I still know very well grew up smoking. A lot of the people passing these laws were smoking when they were very young. What bugs me the most about this, and I've been talking about this all day because in my job, I sell tobacco. So this affects, well, it only affects me in so much as there's another group of people that I have to turn away if they're underage or whatever. I don't really have a problem telling people, sorry, law changed, I can't sell to you. They're going to be bummed, but I can handle that. I'm still going to get paid. My business is not going to go under because of this. We make a lot of money on wine, craft beer, and old people buying vape stuff because they are a huge part of the market. So I'm not worried about it for myself, but I have been talking to people about it all day long. And the thing that bugs me about it is that it is a right being taken away from an adult. And we actually do protect people based on age. That's actually one of the reasons that it bugs me that older people are always trashing on millennials nowadays. I know that it's very hip to do, but it's unbecoming. And not the least of which is because age is actually one of the groups that is protected in anti-discrimination laws. So while everybody else does not feel okay discriminating against other people based on gender or sexual orientation, we're all very PC nowadays. It is wildly popular to call young people stupid or brain dead or all the kinds of things that your parents and grandparents called you when you were younger, speaking to older people, that is. But aside from that, 18-year-olds are adults. They're just another group of adults. But because they are younger, it is easier to alienate them and take away their rights, essentially. These are people who historically have gone to war and fought and died and are currently doing so. And you bet if we need a draft again, we are going to send some 18-year-olds to die. And they are not going to be smoking cigarettes while they do it. I'm curious to see what the military is going to do about cigarette distribution among troops, because I don't know how you're going to keep 21-year-old platoon members from giving their cigarettes to 18-year-old platoon members, or if they're just going to exempt the military from this outright. But anytime you take something away from 18-year-olds, you need to ask yourself, why are we taking things away from other adults? And can they do that to us? I mean, what if we start saying that people over the age of retirement shouldn't drink or smoke? What if we say people shouldn't drink? I mean, I drink occasionally, but I would almost support prohibition. At least with cigarettes, you're only killing yourself. With alcohol, there is a propensity towards killing innocent people in car accidents. Exactly, Glenn. Well, now you can't even have a cigarette. They've passed the law that you can join the army, you can sign a contract, you can literally go into debt for hundreds of thousands of dollars to purchase a home or to get school debt, and that is debt that cannot be bankrupted out of. That is locked with you for the rest of your life, gaining interest, and you can sign that the day that you're 18 without parental oversight. But you cannot smoke a cigarette. You can get married, you can have children, you can get a tattoo, but you can't go buy some vape juice or a nicotine toothpick or a can of chew. I mean, there are kids down in the South who have been dipping and farming since they were 10 and younger. And now they cannot unless somebody else is buying it for them, which is a crime. And I mean, that's if they're over 18, which already it was a problem. But to me, it's a big deal because that is just, it's the precedent of it. It's a nanny state thing. And if they can take rights away from one person for nanny state reasons, they can take rights away from anybody for nanny state reasons. Yeah, and many people have been making the same argument since they raised the drinking age. And I think that the drinking age argument is stronger because, like I said, drunk driving kills children. It kills innocent people who have nothing to do with what you were doing. At least when you're smoking, you're only harming yourself. But if you're going to try to save innocent lives, and this goes for gun laws too, the number of people who are killed in drunk driving accidents is overwhelming compared to the number of people who are shot with guns. Oh, we're going to have to talk about those in secret, Tony. Just get my kick from my about page and we'll talk about that. It's not there. Or there is none, but it's not there. There should be an age or a test or something that moves you from childhood to adulthood. Like a coming of age. No, I agree. There should be a basic like logic trick test to see if you've developed the function to be able to watch out for yourself or assess things. No, Tony, it's because for some reason that email does not give me notifications on the devices that I'm using because they're not the ones I started the email on. So I just haven't actually checked that my channel email in a while. So sorry about that. Oh. But I'll get on that. Write myself a note. And also because of what you said. Yeah. Because you're a white male. It's discrimination. No, it's because you're old. I think we need to start an age war here. Oh, well, I'll get right on it then. Exactly. Patriot 762. It's just fine to have the Marines or the Air Force come into high schools. And I mean, I remember when I was in high school, they'd come in and like set up a pull-up bar in the lunchroom and give you a water bottle if you could do 5 pull-ups. One of my classmates was actually like a bodybuilder, and he beat all the Marines. He beat every Marine that they could bring in against him. He could do 500 pull-ups, if I remember correctly. It was hundreds of pull-ups in a row that he could do. Just pump it out for you. But yeah, they can go in there. They can literally advertise to children in high schools. Literally being endorsed by your school teachers and the people that control your idea of the world and what you should do, telling you that it's a good idea to go and join the military and die for your country, which, by the way, won't let you drink, smoke, or all these other things because, by the way, you're not actually an adult. We still think that you're too young to think for yourself. Well, yeah, Glenn won Arthur, but then what level of, at what age does it then start degrading past that point? Because if it's like 70 or something or 80, like, I mean, there's a lot of older people who start degrading past the brain functionality of a 16-year-old. So I don't know. I think that whenever we start taking away people's rights, we need to be careful about it. That's crazy, Palmetto. Yeah, mountain climbers are crazy. Yeah, you can get an abortion under 18. But I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are about the age. I mean, I know Glenn's not under the purview of this necessarily, but and I think most of you have mostly voiced your opinion. But and that's what Patriot 762 said. Is I think that it's all part of a plan by Big Tobacco. I think that pretty soon we're going to see vaping being endorsed by Big Tobacco. I think we're going to see products coming out from Marlboro and Camel and all these different companies. And those will be safe. They'll be certified by the FDA. They'll be extremely expensive and taxed very high. But to me, what this all comes down to is the fact that everybody missed the boat on taxing vape products and on owning vape product companies when they thought that it was going to be a fad. Now they've successfully choked out a lot of the smaller companies by killing the flavored juice industry in a lot of states. And I think that we're going to see that continue, and we're going to see then the big tobacco companies coming in with something that is declared morally okay to sell, and they will have co-opted the market. Already, many of these small businesses that sell vapor products have been choked out by this. Yeah, exactly. Big Tobacco does already own Juul, and are making big moves in the industry. And I think that this sudden change to 21 being shoehorned into the finance bill is a part of that. But as I think a lot of you guys are probably agreeing with, anytime that someone's rights are getting taken away, it does not bode well. And I think this goes hand in hand with Virginia. And it'll bug me if people don't tie the two together to a certain degree, or at least talk about it a little more with all this other stuff going on. I haven't weighed in too much on Virginia, and I still haven't decided if I want to. But if people are going to make a big hoorah about rights being taken away, I think that it needs to be across the board, because the same exact criteria that you use to decide what rights you're going to fight for or not fight for are the same ones that can be used against you and in ways that you haven't figured out yet. Everybody has something that someone else can argue should be taken away, that they should be protected for. Whether you drink, whether you like sugar, whether you like pornography, whatever your vice is, almost nobody in this world is so righteous that they have nothing impure that someone else can take away from them. I mean, to a certain degree, Tony, yeah, but I'll argue that the cigarette industry was never truly beat. I mean, there's so many young kids smoking cigarettes still. Um, and to be honest, a lot of grown ass adults really like the candy flavors and all that stuff. Um, and, you know, at the end of the day, when it comes right down to it, if your kid can't say no to themselves when they want candy, you probably bought them every candy bar they ever screamed for in the candy store. I know my parents didn't, but this all comes down to raising your kids right. And if you didn't, then they might go out and get themselves some lung cancer. But I don't really care, to tell you the truth. You know, when it comes down to it, if it means preserving our rights and the rights of future generations and not building a slippery slope for other rights to go down, then I am just fine with a bunch of 18-year-olds jumping into vaping. As much as I would like for cigarette use to not be common, I think that it's a bad thing. But at the same time, I'll accept it, just like many other sacrifices of safety that we make for the sake of freedom, if you will. Can you imagine doing this in the Old West? Instituting any tobacco age in the Old West, let alone 21 years old? All right, Glenn Arthur, thanks for dropping in. Catch you later. And that's fair enough, Tony. I definitely think it's fair to say that it's a crime to expose other people to secondhand smoke. And if you've been smoking or doing all these things, then that trickles out. Do you drink? Because then I think that nobody should ever have to pay for anything that could be caused by drinking. Do you eat a lot of McDonald's? Then I think that anything that might be caused by nutrition deficiency or eating highly processed foods you can't get treatment for that's paid by somebody else. So there's always a precedent, and that's more or less fine. I don't really think that anybody should be forced to pay for anybody else's anything. But at the same time, I think that it'd be great. I think that that's sort of what churches and humanitarian efforts are for. And unfortunately, those are either choked out of being able to do their job by regulation, or I actually tend to think that people are generous enough that if in this day and age, especially if there was the ability to just digitize that, if it were legal and possible to make an app where you could crowdfund medical care in an uncorrupt way, I think that would be possible nowadays. Crowdfunding seems to do pretty well. There are, at least seem to be, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that crowdfunding like GoFundMe and stuff generally is a pretty legally safe system. That's the thing, Tony. I mean, I'm all for helping. I think that most people in America have accepted some degree of socialism. I mean, that's you can't really argue that we don't have a lot of social programs. Some people would argue that we just shouldn't, or they shouldn't extend beyond the state level. And that might be fair. But to a certain degree, we do pay welfare. We do have welfare. And the extent to which we pay for that kind of thing is an ongoing matter of argument. But aside from arguing whether or not we can keep other people from doing things that they want to do, even if it harms them, arguing about healthcare is sort of trickling the argument outwards, because again, we can argue about a lot of things that we don't currently make illegal, like a lot of things that harm us. Arguably, given the fact that our laws are meant to protect innocence from other people, I will always stand by the fact that we should make alcohol illegal before most other things, because it is just directly connected with people killing innocent people, more so than tobacco or other things. But we don't do that. That's socially acceptable because the majority likes that. But the majority doesn't really care about 18-year-olds and tobacco use. Well, then you would need to get a prescription for it, Tony. Just like, say you've got depression and need alcohol instead of serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Too much power to the doctors. I hear medicinal spirits were pretty popular back during Prohibition. Ooh, Mexican chocolate latte. The spices got pretty powerful towards the bottom there. I don't know, Space Girl. It's especially interesting considering how often they do it poorly. Like, the number of medicines that are poorly prescribed or like given to someone who's allergic to that medicine, or the medicine is actually not the one that they meant to write down. Medical fallibility is rampant. So the fact that one of the tightest controls that we have on things is limiting who can write prescriptions for drugs, when the people who are allowed to write prescriptions for drugs actually seem to be selected from a group of people who should not be selected for that often. I don't understand that. I'm not very approving of the medical system as it stands. Yeah, Tony, like that. I believe that medical professionals should be servants to the public. More like the Jedi than the biblical priest caste. Like, okay, not like the Jedi as they exist in. Never mind, that was a bad analogy for most people. Public servants, actual public servants. I think they should have to do like an 8-year internship. The advertising of medications. Yeah, you can't advertise tobacco, but you can advertise, whatever pan, which has side effects like anal leakage and suicidal ideation. Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense, Foco. How you doing, by the way? Team Foco in the house, everybody. No, Tony, it doesn't. Especially considering that if you go into a doctor and say, hey, doctor, I think that I know what I need from you, you're going to get a look of judgment, and then they're going to find any other thing that possibly fits the bill besides the thing that you thought you needed. If you broke your leg and you go into a doctor and say, doctor, I've broken my leg, they will do everything that they can, everything, to have it be something besides a broken leg. You will have, I don't know, they'll put a cast on you, but it'll be for your muscles or something like that. They will not ever take the patient's prescription or prognosis. Maybe I've never had a good doctor. I'm sure that there's like 2 doctors out there, and one of you guys is going to say, oh, that's not true. I know a doctor who would, or I would, and I'm a doctor. But well, thanks for stopping by, Foco. Yeah, Tony, that's pretty much just par for the course. Here's these 2 drugs, but these 2 drugs are going to give you some nasty side effects. So to stop those things, you need these 3 drugs. Now, unfortunately, those drugs cause some nasty side effects. So we're going to need to put you on these patches. Now, those patches can only last for so long. So every 3 months, you're going to need to come in for a shot to make sure that, yeah. Meanwhile, you just needed some vitamin C. Or diet and exercise. Yeah, Space Girl, but it's not a God complex so much as it's It's a caste. I'm not sure how most people pronounce it, but it's a hierarchy. They're the priests. Like back in the day, where only priests or monks knew how to read. You weren't allowed to own books unless you were part of the priesthood, essentially. There's always some class of people who have some sacred knowledge that they're having that knowledge makes them better than other people, and they control who has access to that knowledge. If you're not currently up to all your licensing and all that stuff and current learning, then what you knew in the past is wrong. And things do change. It's medicine is a changing thing, but yeah, don't smoke or vape, but 48% of keep dropping my phone. 40% of everybody is on some kind of narcotic being prescribed to them. I think it's more than 40%, 48% in a lot of places. Oh yeah, Tony. They absolutely do get kickbacks. And as far as I know, there's no governing body like the FEC, the Federal Election Committee, making sure that doctors aren't getting vacations paid for, indirect contributions from these companies. I specifically remember, a little bit of personal history for you guys, when I grew up on ADD medication, and when I say grew up, I mean when I first went to kindergarten, they told my parents to take me to a doctor because I was too hyperactive. So I don't know, what age do you start kindergarten? Under 10? From that age, I was prescribed Adderall or Ritalin or whatever drug was being pumped out at the time. And whatever drug I was being prescribed, because I'd go in every couple of months, whatever drug the doctor was suggesting, it was being written with a pen that had that drug's name on it, onto a notepad that had that drug's name on it, and he had Kleenexes that had Adderall on it, and whatever other promotional pieces that a representative ever brings with them, they were all over the place. And I was on that all of my childhood. So, yeah, it's absolutely a conflict of interest. The doctors are absolutely being told to push what drugs, and they're doing it regardless of, without any personal understanding of what it is that they're telling their charges to take. There's no personal responsibility for many doctors. And these are people who should, medical care should be, if nothing else is sacred in the world anymore, it should at least be promising to take care of somebody else's health and then not doing it. And that's exactly what has happened. Is medical care is directly a financial endeavor for almost the entire industry. Why does this always derail my conversations no matter what? It's an important issue, but it's not exactly about 18-year-olds and their tobacco use. Hey, Broussard, how you doing? Which one of you guys is it? I figured it was you, Brett. How you doing? And Food Forest Boomer Culture. How you doing? Sorry, Tony. Which one are you referring to? As do I think it's a social issue more than anything? The healthcare or the tobacco use? Teenagers using nicotine? You know, I think about that a lot because, I mean, I this is my job. For those of you who aren't aware still at this point, my current job, I work in a store. I'm doing well, Howie. Thank you. I am the assistant manager of a vice shop, if you will. We sell alcohol, largely. Well, we sell a lot of domestics, but we sell a lot of local craft brews, pretty expensive stuff. And it's amazing how many people buy that stuff around here. My city is actually known for people who like to drink hoity-toity beers. And holy crap, I mean, we sell a lot of $20 bottles of single beers. That's a $12 bottle of beer right there. And we sell $20 bottles of beer that are just 12 ounces. And I'm in northern Idaho, up near where Hidden Valley Homestead's going to be. I can't tell you how many people will buy five $20 beers this big for $100, 5 beers. Less than a 6-pack. And they will be overjoyed to go home and drink their $20 12-ounce beers. And I'll admit, some of them are pretty good compared to a normal beer. You know, they're handcrafted and barrel-aged for a year and whiskey barrels and all kinds of fun stuff. Anyways, we sell that stuff. And we sell a lot of vapor products and cigarettes and cigars. Make beer and wine for pennies, and I bet it's pretty good. I've had homemade wine and brandy. I haven't had homemade beer. Right on, Broussard. Cool. Yeah, I like Scott. But yeah, I'm up in the panhandle of Idaho. But we sell a lot of vapor and a lot of cigarettes and a lot of cigars. But getting back to what Palmetto was asking me, I have been thinking a lot about actually before I even knew that the 21 age thing had gone through, I've been thinking a lot about it this week. I was actually, is it from Colombia? No, it's just handcrafted stuff, man. I don't know what it is. Some of the stuff, I mean, literally, yeah, there's a bottle that's $25. That's a 12-ounce bottle. And people have been waiting for it to come out. It comes out every year on Thanksgiving or on Black Friday. And people line up for it. They come in and buy as many as we'll let them. We actually put a 3 per person limit on some of this stuff because people they flock in, they buy it, they put it in their cellar and let it sit for 2 years, and then they throw a party and drink 5 years worth of this stuff in a row. I mean, it's like fine wines for people. That's really cool for Howie. That's actually really cool. A lot of people around here really are into that kind of stuff. I mean, I find it pretty interesting just because it is my job now and I've had to learn a lot about it. So I am able to hold conversation about this stuff. It's never been I've never been a heavy drinker, and when I do, I sip bourbon just lightly for relaxation. But I've never been a big drinker. Never been a social drinker, or cared especially not much about brews, beer or wine. But definitely been in a steep learning curve because my job is more or less dealing with beer snobs. So, um, yeah, I agree with you, Tony. But basically, um, for one thing, before we get into it, I think it's beside the point what is causing 18-year-olds to want to smoke or causing people younger than 18 to want to vape or whatever you have. And Brett, meat is good. I think that that's a good thing to know how to do, especially if you have bees. And bees are one of the best things to have because they provide you with sugar, which is pretty hard to come by in a lot of places. And they're going to pollinate for you. And if you have honey, you can make alcohol. And mead is a good alcohol. Oh, I collect so many taxes, Patriot. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Uh, but I also pump out a lot of death sticks. I want to sell you death sticks. That's cool, Brett. I would actually really like to learn. I totally just spaced what you call beekeeping. There's a word for it. Something culture. 71% of Americans live below the poverty line and cannot afford booze, so folks make their own. Apiary? That sounds like where you do that. Wouldn't it be apiculture or something like that? I mean, yeah, part of it is because it's cool. Make something not cool at all, people won't really want to do it. But hey, Vanessa Kitty, how you doing? Welcome to the chat. Happy New Year. Um, oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I figured. That sort of like an aviary is where you keep birds. So a beekeeper is an apiarist. I typed in the art of beekeeping, and I should have known that that would just give me the title of a book. Sorry, sometimes I need to know. Melitology? That's studying bees. Damn it, Google, you're letting me down. Beekeeping. Apiculture. I was right. But yes, I've only tried mead. Well, it was a local brew, a local vintner, I guess. But it was good. And I'm actually going to try some huckleberry mead whenever I can get it. Somebody came in and told me that actually the mead that I tried wasn't a very good one, that I wanted to try the huckleberry mead from the same vintner. And then they bought all of the stuff that I had. So I was like, all right, I'll try that next time around. But yeah, mead is a good alcohol. It's pretty strong, and there's a reason that it was pretty popular, and the reason it would be popular again. Military on the basis, or have they just banned? Like, okay, Vanessa, do you know what if they've banned tobacco use throughout the military, or what are they? How does anybody know how the military is responding to the new age limit? The smoke pit was where all the cool stuff went down, says Tony. Blackberry filled moonshine is nice. I remember you talking about blackberry filled moonshine. Elderberry wine. Do you know that that is actually directly where the Monty Python line comes from? Your your father smelt of elderberries. Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries. That's because poor people drank elderberry wine because you couldn't afford grapes. So you just went and picked some elderberries and let them ferment and drank that. And it had a very distinctive smell, and you were considered to be poor. I thought I had heard about that no smoking on the bases before this law, Vanessa. But I am curious what the military is going to do now that the FDA has made the tobacco age 21. Because, I mean, in my mind, soldiers and cigarettes are sort of like synonymous. I think you might have, I mean, unless I'm wrong and the military has recently undergone a big social change where smoking isn't ubiquitous. And how do they treat drinking, Tony? I guess I'm not really sure. I would be under the impression that an underage soldier can get a hold of alcohol. Popping a saved 09 Dom for New Year's and a Brute in 2020. That sounds fun. All right, good to see you, Brett. Have a good night. Thanks for dropping in. Okay, so you get in a lot of trouble if you're caught for drinking. Yeah, I mean, I guess the military can pretty much just enforce whatever they want because they're the military and they have the ability to make you do however many push-ups they want until you don't no longer want to do the thing they don't want you to do. So they're probably going to have an easier time doing this than places where kids have 21-year-old friends. That's the other thing is I know how many. I mean, you can tell when adults are buying things for their kids. It's pretty clear because they have their face in their phone and they're obviously looking at pictures or text messages about what they're supposed to be picking up. All right, fair enough. Yeah, that makes sense. Have you done any research on apple cider there, Tony? I mean, aside from personal field research. Like, do you know how you would go about making an apple cider? I mean, I assume that there's a bit of an art to it. I mean, I know that there's an art to beer making, but you can also get away with some pretty crappy beer making, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure you can mess up cider a lot more ways than you can mess up throwing hops into some water with some yeast, personally. That's true. You're like a yeast master. You're a yeast whisperer. Yeah, but I feel like you could. I feel like you could mess up the apple. I feel like it could sour because there's so much going on. Whereas with beer, you're adding raw ingredients to water. Whereas with cider, you're adding raw ingredients to something that's very much active and alive already. So you have to worry about your apple juice just going bad while you're also doing something. Whereas with beer, you don't really need to worry about your fresh mountain water going bad. And that's true. Apple cider vinegar is like a craze, so you can't really go wrong with that. You just have to feel bad killing someone's mother to add it in there. I don't know why people don't have a problem with all the matricide going on out there for their apple cider vinegar. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it won't kill you if you do it wrong and drink a little bit of it. Basically, might give you a heck of a stomach ache. That would be fun though. I'm a big fan of hard apple cider. Yeah, that makes sense. But beer already smells off. I mean, I've actually reached a point where I can appreciate the taste of beer. I've acquired the taste for it. But objectively, beer does not smell good. It just doesn't taste good. That's what surprises me, actually, with beer and seltzers and stuff. The fact that actual apple ciders are not more popular in America, given that Americans love soda and sweet things like candy and stuff. Um, the fact that bitter wines and hoppy beers are more popular than something which is literally apple juice, which many Americans love in their childhood. It's just adult apple juice. It actually sort of boggles me a little bit that there's like a blind spot for most of America there. And as a side note, apples are a very American thing. Like, apples are patriotic. And for some reason, that's something that we've lost sight of. But apples used to be very unpleasant things pretty much before America. I always mess this up. Potatoes are the apple of the ground, right? Pomme de terre in France, in French, and multiple languages, I think, because apples used to be like potatoes and vice versa. They used to be tasteless, sugarless things until Americans cultured them, basically bred them into what they are today. In early American times, like colonial times and on, it was pretty common, especially in the South, for individual families to have multiple individual strains that were unique to their farm of different kinds of apple that they had cultivated from just unique genetic mutations. And a lot of our apple strains, in fact, they're still making new ones. There's somebody just told me about this in one of my past live streams. There's a new apple strain out of Washington that is traditionally bred. Let's see. It's called the Cosmic Crisp Apple. It's the first widely grown apple variety developed in Washington, ripens at the same time as the Red Delicious, and is expected to replace a large part of Red Delicious stocks. Muscadine wine. I have not tried muscadine, but I've wanted to. Lots of fresh apple cider. Yeah, Vanessa. I grew up, in Texas, actually. Yeah, in the South. Every fall, we'd go out to an orchard and pick apples and then bring them into the farmhouse or the barn. And they had a little pavilion with a bunch of cider presses. And you just drop your apples in and sit there and turn the press. It was like a little fall activity that families would go do. And you'd pick and press your own apple cider and just pay them for whatever to go and do it and get the jugs and stuff. It's a part of culture, but a lot of people don't appreciate that apples are a very American thing. And I mean, it's not like uniquely American, but Tony says they're actually scouring old homesteads in Pennsylvania and Michigan this just recently to try to recover lost varieties, dead varieties that have been neglected and fallen into, neglect. But, there's still maybe a few of those trees sitting there that can be spliced and regenerated, because there are different unique varieties of apples. It's something that there are just a lot of. Good for livestock feed back in the day. And that's the interesting thing, Patriot, with anytime something is banned, people go to the black market for it. They are, and that's one thing that a lot of people, it does suck for all those people, because I remember when I was 18, I was smoking. When I was 19, when I was 20. And for all these people, it has been okay, and they've had no reason to think that it wouldn't be okay. And this is a very sudden change. These people are no longer able to get their fix, their thing that they believed was okay for them to have, because it has always been okay for as long as they can remember. And for past generations, you can get cigarettes when you're 18. There's a lot of people who are just as addicted to cigarettes as any of you have ever been, and legally so. 19-year-olds who've been smoking a pack a day because they work out in the field, and they've been smoking a pack a day for a year. And it's just been taken away from them. So what it's doing then is turning a bunch of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds into criminals. American chestnut tree. A Marb Red fan. I never did get into Marb Reds. I started with Camel Turkish Royals, went to Camel 99s, tried a couple different other ones, but then I ended up smoking Blue American Spirits for a very long time. And then I quit cold turkey when I got sick one time, and I haven't smoked in over 2 years now. One Chinese import, huh? That's crazy. Like a single specimen, you say? Mohammed Sharif, where do you don't live in America, do you? Well, that's probably good for you, Mohammed, because you can't buy tobacco if you're under 21 now. Most places. Everywhere soon. Oh, the Chinese chestnut tree brought a disease. Gotcha. Well, that's cool, Vanessa. Yeah, Mohammed, that's what I'm chatting about tonight. There was a bill that part of the bill was said that the new tobacco law will make it so that anybody under the age of 21 cannot buy tobacco anymore. It was signed into effect by the president. And even though there was a 6-month window for the FDA to make regulation, they had the regulation ready to put into effect that day. So as of the 20th, when the president signed the law into effect, the FDA also rolled out their regulation stating that it was now illegal to do. And there is no grandfathering. So anybody who was already over 18 but not yet 21, it doesn't matter. You're under 21. Doesn't matter how much you're addicted to it. You're done. How much for a pack? Right now, Marb Reds at my work are sitting at around $5.80, I think. $5.80 American. And I imagine that right now that means they're about $11 for anybody underage. Well, now I'm not sure actually, Patriot, if possession was illegalized. Previous laws say that possession by anybody under 18 is illegal, but actually I think that this law actually states it is illegal for retailers to sell to anybody under the age of 21. Yeah, I bet so too, Tony. That is one interesting thing is I think that Trump probably felt that he has lost the young vote because he did just lose a lot of young voters. But he probably feels like they're all Bernie voters, anyways. But I bet you that there's a lot of redneck boys who just decided not to vote for Trump. I mean, he took away their dip. $3 in here, huh? That sounds that's pretty cheap. But I actually, unless I'm mistaken, I think that the possession age is still 18, but the age for purchasing is 21. Qatar, huh? Well, thanks for dropping in. That's pretty cool. I don't think I've ever had anybody else from Qatar drop in. I'm sure you pronounce it differently than how I think we pronounce it here. Well, yeah, Vanessa, but both parties can do something. A lot of people are not Qatar. Oh, okay. I was thinking maybe. Yeah, I don't really know how to guess at that kind of pronunciation. But Vanessa, especially with younger people. Oh, okay, Egyptian, huh? That's very interesting. I'm always interested in international identity. Uh, Being somebody who's never traveled outside of my own jurisdiction here, it's very interesting for me to consider being a person of one nationality living abroad in areas that to me are very exotic. Tony floated by the area a couple times in his sailing adventures at sea. Well, thank you, Mohammed. I appreciate that. I don't feel so cool, but I appreciate that. Um, but yeah, Vanessa, a lot of people don't even, a lot of people don't identify with parties or congressmen or things like that. They're closer to identifying with a candidate like the president or Bernie Sanders or something like that. I don't know any young people who can identify representatives as much as they should, as much as the focus should absolutely be on representatives. But a lot of those people are older than any of us are. Most of them are, like twice. Not older than, but actually been in office longer than we've been alive. 2 of our lifetimes. And there's no reason that somebody like Trump should identify with us any more than somebody in Congress does. But my point there is, I was sort of surprised at first that Trump would do, but I mean, the voting base of people who are 18 to 21 and wanted to use tobacco products is rather small, but they definitely don't like him anymore. Been to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Egypt, and Canada. Well, that's pretty cool. More places than I've been. I've been to a variety of U.S. states and Canada. So, Vanessa, you're saying you've been to all but 5 states? Swamp has never left his family's property. I bet there are some people for whom that's the case, if they consider their property to be quite large. Probably mostly bayou people and like deep mountain families. Oh, and hello, Swamp. How you doing? Your name is Swamp. Are you a bayou person? Are you so deep in the backwater that you've literally never left what you might consider to be your front and backyard? Your family just brought internet home to you one day? Nope, nothing going on here, Swamp. I think it petered out a little while ago. We're just all over the place. But now that you're here, we can probably solve a couple of world social issues, injustices, or ongoing catastrophes. Are you telling me there's no bayou in California? I'm sure we could find some swamp in there. Oh, get out of our swamp. I'm sure there's a swamp somewhere in California. I'm sure Trump thinks there's a swamp in California. Oh no, Foco. Coptic Christians, yeah, they're the ones who, yeah, Egypt doesn't like very much. But yeah, they're very traditional, aren't they? Oh, I've seen the movie. Parfaits have layers. Onion ogres are like onions. Oh, they stink. No. Oh, you leave them out in the sun, they go brown, start growing little white hairs. No, they have layers. Man, that was such a good impersonation that I'm probably going to get copyright striked. Interesting. Oh yeah, I'm sure I sounded just like him. It's a good movie. I might need to watch that again. That was one of those movies I used to play on repeat whenever I fall asleep. I don't need to know what you fantasize about when you close your eyes, Tony. Hello, Death Milk, live in Oklahoma. All right. I don't know what Death Milk is, but it sounds pretty extreme. Is that milk with death, or is that literally the lactation from the Grim Reaper? It sounds like an energy drink. I bet that's an energy drink somewhere. All right. See you, Foco. Thanks for dropping in. We'll catch you later. They should be, Tony. Same with coffee and driving cars. Very lactose intolerant, huh? And you know what? I think we should make it illegal to make people under the age of 21 work. Work is pretty damn bad for you. You know that? Work's pretty dangerous, too. A lot of people die before they're 21 working. You know, I think I just found a social cause. I'm going to become a social justice warrior and make sure that nobody works under the age of 21. I mean, if you can't smoke and you can't drink, why should you have to pay taxes or break your back? No, I couldn't wait to start working either. I did it when I was 16. But you understand my point. I mean, we're in a hurry for them to get onto the job market and go die for us, but not in a hurry for them to get to do make their own choices. Well, it's a good name, Death Milk. I like it. I'm surprised there isn't a monopoly on it already. Well, that's unfortunate, Vanessa. I definitely think people should be working at a younger age, but I'm just pointing out the dichotomy of what we expect from 18-year-olds and then what we'll subject them to. Yeah, that's actually a big problem is, the coddling of America. A lot of people are being allowed to not work. That's a little too Roman for my appreciation. But, I feel like that happened during the hippie era, too. I mean, I think that's pretty much been happening since the baby boomer era. People have just had enough money for a fair number of their kids to just sit at home and have things paid for them. I think it's actually about to swing back the other way to where there's not enough money around to have people pay for things. I mean, I haven't really had that option. My parents have needed help from their children often enough just because of the recession and stuff. Well, let's be fair, our swamp. Most of the kids need marijuana and social security disability because they're depressed because society has messed them up or their parents have. I was actually thinking about this today and why so many millennials are messed up. Now, it's actually not their fault. The Orient is very family oriented. What's going to burn there, Death Milk? Don't got nothing catching on fire behind me, do I? Have friends that raise their kids on the extreme other end of the spectrum. How do you mean by that? Oh, the USA is going to burn one day? Well, I imagine that they will one day. We will one day. Pretty safe to say for pretty much any civilization. But I'm actually on the fence about that as for within the next insert time period here, honestly. Yep, I did that, Tony. I actually didn't have much choice because I turned 18 just before the 2008 recession, and um, so my family had to move from Oregon, where we lived, to Idaho just after I turned 18. And because I was desperately in love with somebody in Oregon, I moved back there on my own. So I just sort of, as a consequence of my decisions, had to go leap into that. Um, they didn't turn out too well because the area of Oregon where I was living was not priced for young people striking out on their own. It was definitely for white collar workers. Yeah, roommates can be really bad. Oh, that sucks, Tony. Well, that's good. What's going on in Tulsa? Or do you just mean that it might actually have a fire? Yeah. Sort of funny you don't like rules and you join the military. Yeah, that makes sense, Tony. Oh, is there a lot of crime in Tulsa there? Yeah, getting paid does change a lot about it, doesn't it? Yeah, I've always wanted to fly a helicopter. All right. Well, we're far enough into the stream that we can talk about it without it being what the video becomes about in the comments. But have I considered serving? I used to. Had a lot of people tell me not to. That's cool, Swamp. All right. So what I was going to say is your opinions on the state of the union in regards to civil war. Um, I've been reluctant to state my opinion on it or make a video on it. I very nearly did a couple different times because I like being contrary, but I'm reluctant to do that. But I'm curious what you guys have to say, your opinion on, because I don't think a lot of you have made videos about the Virginia thing and the Civil War thing and stuff. But curious about your opinion on it. John J. 2019 is referring to when I was talking about the age of adulthood and stuff in regards to the original topic of the video. Swamp says don't make a video on it, and I'm leaning towards not. Except that, Swamp, the point of my video would be to say that it's BS, but it would be a very complex video to make to get my point across properly. Yeah, I'm not worried about a civil war. The main point of my video would be that I think that if anybody were to go and talk to anyone near them who is not tied into YouTube or Facebook or echo chambers like that, you go up to people. I mean, the idea of going up to people in grocery stores, like your cashier even, and saying, what do you think the chances are of a civil war? They'd give you a look like you were crazy, because that idea is not in the mind of most people. You have to look to find articles that talk about it in mainstream sources, and then you have to remind yourself that most people are not reading those kinds of things or caring about them. So the idea of a civil war happening, the idea of there being something, an open civil war, is a little ridiculous to me. Now, I fully believe that there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, and I fully believe that there are people crazy enough to go to Virginia and cause violence on both sides. There are a lot of people in our community who want it enough that it wouldn't surprise me if out of the vast majority we've got legitimate right-wing crazies who will instigate violence trying to start a civil war, thinking it actually would. But what that will come down to is individual incidents that probably have no power to actually start a wildfire that everybody thinks is going to happen. Yeah, I mean, we haven't even seen any good right-wing riots yet, and the idea that it'll go from zero to civil war. And one of the things that bugs me the most, and I do like calling out BS, commonly stated BS, but at the same time, I like to avoid drawing trolls to myself or just directly calling people out on their opinions just for shock value or outrage value. As much fun as it is, and as much as I think that is at least a little bit next tier compared to just jumping in on hype, it bothers me that a lot of channels, not just channels, but just people in comment sections or in general, who have absolutely no involvement with the process, whether that be, and I don't mean just voting, because I don't think that just voting is enough anymore. But if you want to be vocal about civil war, if you want to be vocal about issues that pop up occasionally, even people who are going to Virginia, I'm curious what they do with the rest of their time. Now, if you're willing to go to Virginia, maybe you are a little more likely to be an activist in the rest of your time. But if you're not voting with your dollars, if you're not actively boycotting companies that are based in Virginia or something like that, if you're not actively doing the things that are steps, if you're not committing economic warfare already against people that are contrary to your beliefs, then you have no place to be calling for open warfare that will cause the deaths of civilians, basically, is what I'm trying to get at. Exactly, Tony. People think the Civil War will be a clock in and clock out event. Like, it won't affect everything they're currently involved in: their kids' schooling, healthcare, and simple interstate commerce. And that's exactly my point. If you can't just like, all right, guys, we are now currently in a state of civil war, and expect things to continue. You can't expect. I don't know. First off, you would need to delineate what the Civil War looks like. Is it going to be rural versus urban? Um, would neighboring states declare war on Virginia? Um, what would the Civil War even look like? How would you delineate the lines, and how would anybody know who to attack? Um, it's not as though if violence pops off in Virginia, then all of a sudden across the country, people are going to declare themselves for one side or another, and there will be your civil war. The most that will happen is there's like some major gun violence event in Virginia that comes out one way or another, and maybe that will cause riots in other cities or something. But I think that I think that the idea that there's just going to be this rolling wave of revolution across the country after a defining event is fantastical thinking. It's almost Hollywood level thinking. But it bugs me that people want to claim that we're at that point, but then they log off of YouTube. They're done with that commenting on that live stream, and then they go buy McDonald's. And I wonder how many people who are calling for civil war are actually prepared for it. I mean, I really hope that all the people who are hoping and praying for a civil war, so that for a constitutionally reviving civil war, I hope that they're more connected than I believe they are. Because my impression is that most of the people who are calling for these things are completely disconnected from each other and have no communication or coordination. If there is going to be a civil war, I definitely hope that the constitutionalists have some kind of underground communication network where none of the actual serious individuals are here on YouTube and talking, because that is definitely the kind of thing where if you're here on YouTube being vocal about it, you are almost certainly not an ex-military individual who is actually poised and ready to be involved in the new civil war. Because if you actually believe that there was going to be a civil war, if you actually believe that you yourself were going to be fighting in a technological modern civil war, the last thing that you would actually be doing is being here on YouTube talking about it in a comment section. You might be on here trying to rally people, but most of these people are not actually doing anything as a proactive entity. I really don't see a lot of coordinated organizations calling for coordination for that kind of activism. It is. I believe that it is a lot of keyboard warriors. And for people who don't want to consider themselves keyboard warriors, but are calling for some kind of massive response to this, I think that they need to ask themselves if they are riding the hype. And this ties into how I feel about voting every 4 years. So many people feel like if they vote for the president every 4 years, they can tap out the rest of the time. And I would much rather that nobody vote for the president and just let it get picked by other elected officials, but actually pay attention to the representatives who actually have an effect on the majority of the rest of the stuff, while the president very openly and loudly affects a minority of things. But the fact that people think that they can vote every 4 years or just get involved whenever there's some uproar over an event like Virginia, I feel makes them feel like the rest of the time they've already done their job and they can tap out and just live their life. And the next time that something important comes along, they'll get involved again. But I think that things like this actually give people a sense of security the rest of the time, and that's whenever the real problems get passed. Exactly. If you're not showing up to local town hall meetings and affecting actual things, not just going to the ballot box every once in a while, but actually, talking to people, actually trying to influence other people. All these people who say we need a civil war, we need to go to Virginia and do these things, I bet they've never printed pamphlets or done any activism, or not nearly as much as they should be before calling for other people to die for their cause. Because that's what you're doing. When you call for civil war, you're saying that it's time for people to die, including innocents. Because there's a lot of things that we can do before civil war, but they're not calling for those. They just want the fantastical route. Exactly, Tony. Before freedom fighters leave their states and go down to Virginia, they really ought to do all that they can in their area to prevent that kind of thing from happening. Because what's really happening while you're all down there in Virginia in January, all of your politicians are going to be at home pulling some kind of wool over your eyes. But yeah, I'm glad you guys agree. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's an important issue, and it is absolutely astounding that the politicians think that they can do that, write that kind of policy. It is very interesting times whenever you have this kind of back and forth going, where they say we're going to write it into law to circumvent what you would do to circumvent our law. Yeah, exactly, Tony. All these freedom fighters aren't running to California or New York or Connecticut or Maryland or Jersey, where all of these laws are in effect, and plenty of millions of Americans live under that kind of restriction every single day. But this is right now, and this is in front of them and being talked about, and this is the current chance to puff up their chest and act like they got involved, and this will give them the opportunity to feel like they've done their part for the next while until the next one comes around. And it will successfully keep them from actually getting involved the rest of the time. I mean, it is. It's crazy that because that is not unlike a coup to say we're going to pass this law, and then anybody who tries to do what they could do to negate it or circumnavigate it, we're going to also create stipulations that allow us to arrest those people to essentially, create an active defense for this law that we've enacted. And I think that it is very wrong. And I think that there are a lot of things that we should do about it. But I think that it's a bait and switch for people to act like that needs to be some kind of fantabulous action. I think that there's a lot that you can do to keep this from happening. And I think that money, being the root cause of a lot of this, is what needs to be the first step. But I don't hear about economic warfare. I don't hear about people targeting the whatever, because politicians have sources of income. I don't hear people identifying which politicians are responsible for this and where they get their money from, what corporations they hold interest in attacking those corporations financially. There's no talk of actually taking steps because that might mean not buying buying a product that you want. And people are not actually very good about boycotting things nowadays. Um, yeah, and that's another thing, Tony. Is I don't want to jump on the bandwagon, but it actually, from my perspective, I wonder how a lot of right wingers who supported Trump feel about him currently. Because from my perspective, he is not exactly holding a lot true for what I perceive a lot of right wingers want from him. I know not everybody who supported Trump was a Republican right winger, but for those that are, he seems to be not pulling their side very much. Well, yeah, sounds from your comments like we're pretty much in line with the Civil War and all the Virginia hype. Mostly, I haven't wanted to do a video because it would more or less be titled, "Please stop acting like there's going to be a civil war in Virginia," or "Please stop acting like a big guy over it." Because, I mean, I think that it's honorable to want to go and fight and die and defend rights and have your voice heard and stuff. But I think that there are harder things to do than to go to Virginia, especially because I think we all know that there's not going to be. I think that we know that the majority of the people who go there are not going to sacrifice their lives for freedom. Maybe there will be a violent incident. Maybe there will be a shooting or something like that. Maybe the left wing will bomb it, or maybe some crazy right winger will bomb the Virginia Capitol or something. I won't rule that out. There are a lot of crazy people, and things are getting fired up enough that one of those crazy people might get driven to something by thinking that the world is different than what it actually is. I think that a lot of people in the YouTube community think the world is something different than it is. I don't think that they talk to the people in their community enough to have a realistic perspective of what the average American sees the world as. Go next time you go through the grocery store line, say, "Hey, what do you think about Virginia and the chance that there will be a second civil war?" And I think that they will look at you like you're crazy. Maybe they'll say, "Oh, I think it's pretty crazy what's going on over there," but I think the majority of people will look at you like that concept is something they've never encountered before, even if they have heard of Virginia. Yeah, exactly. People, the fact that there's no economic warfare, the fact that boycotting is not a very popular thing to do to state your political opinion, the fact that people don't take out personal ads against corporations or things like that, or in favor of certain things, tells me that people aren't doing what it really takes to get things done. It's just social media activism, which is the weakest but most immediately gratifying form of activism. Exactly, Tony. Social media activism does nothing. Uh, keep giving your dollars to the people who are going to enslave you, and you're only going to get enslaved. I mean, if people were really serious about this, then all these YouTube videos where they say, "I'm going down to Virginia to support our brothers," would actually be videos more or less doxing politicians, linking them to companies, and those companies to companies, and calling for boycotts of all of these different products that support politicians. But the uncomfortable truth about that is some of the things that you like and want to buy are going to be on that list. And life might get pretty hard if you actually want to live in such a way where you are actively denying any involvement or, support to people whose ideals you disagree with. When they can't take a week off without everybody else paying for it, they're not going to do a damn thing. That's true. I actually think, I didn't want to say it first, but I think that a lot of channels who are saying, I'm going to Virginia, are doing it as a crowdfunding opportunity or popularity grab. That's just all it is. It's all just a feel-good opportunity. Well, I think that might about do it. That's my second stream, including another video for the day, and I think I'm about feeling it. Might call this stream a good one, unless anybody else has a particularly intriguing topic to re-enrapture us all with. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're compromised. Well, then most Americans are compromised. Well, anybody got big plans for celebrating New Year's, or is it going to be a quiet evening for you guys? Yep, I'll be staying home and having a quiet night, I think. Prepper's daughter will be visiting on Friday, so I'll be doing second Christmas and main New Year's with her. So, yep, going to bed early. Too old for that. Yep, 2020 will get here whether or not we stay up for it. So, just curious. Some people are doing something, Yep, I think my bed's about calling my name. 8:30 here. We'll see. I might crash out, might do a couple things, but that'll about do it for me. I've been going to bed early and getting up early lately. Well, thank you guys for hanging out. Appreciate you all chatting and for your input on the various topics. Very interesting times that we live in. Regardless of how any of this plays out, it is very depressing how what is happening with rights, it seems like it's a constant fight, and not even so much a fight, but just a constant act of watching rights get stripped away from various different directions. And it's hard to know how we can stop it without serious overhauls. And I think that the main thing that needs to be focused on is policymakers and representatives that aren't being representative. I mean, that was why our country got started in the first place, is poor representation. And I think that that's where a lot of our problems are at now. Anyways, thanks for watching. Thank you for watching in the rewatch. If you're watching later on, appreciate your input. Hope you're all doing well. Everybody stay safe out there.